And this guy's a machine. He's always on the phone. He's never out in the streets marketing, right? He's never going to meet realtors. What he does is he puts himself in a position where he's constantly originating business. And this is how he's able to fund over 20 per month. This is the reason why he's making damn near over 40 grand a month, right? So it's because he understands his lane and he doesn't veer off. Now, to answer your question, how do you position yourself so that you can get as much as 20 units? The real question should be, because the marketing will handle that. They'll give you 100 opportunities. It's up to you if you can get 20 of them, right? The real question is, how can I get to 20 plus units without working 12-hour shifts, without having to sacrifice my weekend? How can I outproduce the top producer and only do 8 hours per day? So all you guys were customer service agents right before this?
Yes.
Sweet. And just a show of hands, how many of you guys want to get into being a loan officer because of the income? Yeah, right. It's pretty much it, right? Yeah. So I recognize a couple of you guys' faces because you guys came up from the CSRs, right? A few of you guys I've actually met with. I recognize a couple of you. And I think the last time we met, you guys were actually talking to you about purchase. And we've since transitioned over to the refi market. And so fortunately, refi, if you're gonna come in for your first time to learn, through the sport of refi, it's a little bit easier than the tedious task of actually babysitting through purchase, right? So purchase takes a long time to ramp up. But I know you guys have probably been flooded with a lot of lingo, acronyms, and verbiage that has to do with mortgage that at the end of the day, it's that's going to be there. That's something that you just need to learn through repetition. And that's not something that I'm going to talk about. What I like to talk about is the overall fundamental of sales, because sales in itself is not going to change no matter what industry you go into. Does that make sense? In my opinion, I believe sales is a form of communication. And if I could teach you kind of the overall, I would say, like, spectrum of how the sales process works, then you could use your creativity to make the absolute best of it. You just need to kind of understand how the game works. Otherwise, you'll be too worried about making sure you're doing certain pieces at certain times. And what I do know, because I do have a chance to actually meet and communicate with a lot of brand new loan officers, is the biggest roadblock that you guys run into, it happens to be yourself. It just happens to be kind of like your inner dialogue, your mindset. And the reason for that is because, much like, I would say anyone doing anything new, a lot of the actions and the tasks that you're going to be doing are pretty foreign. And so it's something new and you don't want to be made a fool of, you don't want to be made an example of, and you definitely don't want to embarrass yourself, right? So you're going to be on this constant guard of saying, oh shit, did I do that right? Oh shit, did I say that right? And the funny thing is though, is that you'll come to realize that your clients or your prospects don't know the verbiage either. They don't know how the process works. They don't know that you just got out of a new hire class. They don't know that you're just newly licensed. And so for what that's worth, you want to be able to hold on to that, because how they know you is that you're just the person who's authorized to provide you with the information that they need. Does that make sense? So if you've ever met with like a CPA or an accountant or like a doctor for the first time, you don't know them besides the fact that their title is doctor or that they're an accountant, right? But that person could very well be brand new. They could be very fresh out of school. But at the end of the day, you listen to them because they are an authoritative figure in front of you. Make sense? So what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to go over any acronyms or verbiage and teach you how to sell an ARM or teach you the difference between VA and FHA, because that's something that you're just going to learn on your own. What I want to teach you is a lesson that was taught to me, and I still use this lesson till this day, and it's understanding the Midas touch. For those of you guys who probably received the email where I went through the acronym of Midas, acronyms, right? Mortgage is all about acronyms. It taught me the flow of the sales interaction process. And it became very helpful the more and more I understood it. And I believe that when I was given this lesson, it was from a mentor, and I was probably about maybe my early 20s. Because I started in the mortgage industry when I was about 21 years old. I started as a telemarketer. And I worked for this company called Town and Country Credit, which was a huge subprime lender back in the day. And we worked out of a call center where we sold very high interest rates. We were selling 3-year prepayment penalties on 2-year fixed arms. And so these people were buying higher interest rates, paying 3-4% of the loan amount in fees. And we obviously had competitors right down the street. We had Countrywide, we had Bank of America, we had every other competitor. And what I found myself doing when I was actually going through, this training was that I was burning my wheels. I was putting in the extra hours, and I thought sales in itself was a numbers game. But I've come to realize that it's actually more than that. If you don't mind, I'm gonna take off this jacket. It's a little hot up in here. So what I figured out was that sales is what I thought what it was that sales was just a numbers game. So if I put in the hours, I put in the work, I'm gonna be able to get the results, right? Because I saw veterans working 12, 14-hour days, and they were, they're making a good $10,000 to $15,000 per month. And I, at the time, I'd never made over $10,000 in a month. And that was like my big goal, right? Probably some of your guys' goals here too, right? Crack that 10-figure month. And so when I was going through that experience, what I realized is that the more people that I talked to, I would actually be ghosted a lot. I would be shopped a lot. And I would actually create my own objections. And so he pulled me to the side, and his name was Winston, real old, smooth cat. This dude's been doing it for a while. He pulled me in the room. He used to call me Young Blood. He's like, "Hey, Young Blood," pulled me over to the break room. He's like, "Hey, man, I admire your work ethic, because I just had a baby when I was 21 years old. And so I was hungry, right? And I was also bald-headed, had earrings, baggy clothes, because that was the cool thing back in the day. And so I just literally came from, the streets and kind of like that thug mentality. This is before you need a license, by the way. And I went straight into sales. And he's like, "Hey, man, hey, Young Blood, I realize you're working real hard. You're here first, you're the last one to leave, and I could tell you really want it. And I hear you on the phones, and I'm gonna give you a piece of advice." He said, sales, what you think sales is that you're trying to make them buy something, but you shouldn't have to make them buy anything. You should position yourself to where they need what you have, because then it becomes different, where you're not selling it, you're actually serving it. And at the time, I didn't realize what he meant, because I was like, man, you know what I mean? Like, I see all these other loan officers are talking about closing deals. I'm a closer, like that Glenn Ross movie or the Boiler Room movie, right? And so you thought you were cool because man, I'm a closer. I'm gonna make this person buy. And so that was the mindset that I had. But he brought up this valuable lesson. He said, "Hey, man, I'm gonna teach you one thing that I wish I knew when I was your age." And so I guess his mentor taught him. He said, "The sales cycle, you need to have what's called the Midas touch." I've never heard what the Midas touch meant, right? I never heard it before then. He said, Midas touch, M-I-D-A-S. He said, first you start with the M, and the M stands for marketing and motive. And he said, fortunately, we're with a company, this is very much like NAF, where the marketing's already handled. But the reason why marketing plays a role, marketing is different from sales, just like sales is different from closing. He said, marketing's already handled. So what marketing does is basically finds the attention and it delivers to you. And that's one thing that New American Funding can do very, very well. They have the CSR department, they got mailers, they got internet. And so it's already bringing you the attention. All that part's handled. It's not like you guys are working for any brokers or Ola where you got to go learn that part. So understand that you already have it. But marketing creates something that's called motive. And so when somebody contacts you, it's beyond the fact that they want the free fees or the free costs, right? They don't want the lower interest rate. They do, that's how they say it, but behind that request, there's a motive. He said, in order to have the Midas touch, you need to find what that motive is. See, a lot of new salespeople right away tend to talk about price. So right away they say, hey, what's your interest rate? Right when the phone call starts, how can I help you? It's these questions that actually deter the direction of the conversation to be based on price. And it's very, very dangerous. And that's what I found that I was doing. I was doing it all the time. Like how my introduction started was, hey, my name is Daniel. It's a great day here at my company. How can I help you? And every single time that I asked that question, each one of them responded back and said, yeah, I just want to know what your rates are. And I didn't realize it until he told me that if you allow them to determine the direction of the conversation, it's always going to be focused around rate and fees. And so I started to absorb this message. He said, whatever they ask you, even if they ask you for a 1% fixed, or they ask you for no prepayment penalties, or they ask you for no fees at all, the goal is to keep the momentum going, because your goal is to find their motive, right? So imagine, just a couple months ago, before you guys understood what these acronyms meant and understanding how the mortgage process works, to an everyday consumer, what we look at is the rate determines the mortgage payment. Fair enough to say? So if you didn't understand like amortization schedule, you didn't understand how a mortgage works, all you can put together is that if I get a lower rate, I get a lower payment, right? And so when consumers who are unaware, because they're not NMLS licensed like we are, and they come in, of course, they're just going to want the lowest rate, because the motive is to lower their monthly payment as much as possible. So what he taught me was that when I first hear these requests, don't hear that they want the lower rate or the lower fees. Because what's going to happen is it's going to make you think about the rate sheet. It's going to make you think about the market, or worse yet, it's going to make you default to the question of, well, what's your rate now? And now you're going straight into price. Make sense? Instead, when you hear them say, hey, I want, what's your lowest rate? Or I want this 2.25 30-year fix, but really was an adjustable rate mortgage marketing flyer. Instead hear, hey, Daniel, I need some savings. I really need to lower my payment. They just don't know how to say it, right? So whatever they say to you, say, yeah, great, let me help you put that together. And by the way, a little side note, if you guys go to salesremastered.com, it's my website, and you can't use your work email because the NAF email will quarantine it, but request a copy of the free sales script. You want to use your personal email address, okay? So again, that's salesremastered.com. Get your hands on a copy of that, because a lot of the newer LOs who have been using it have been able to double their results, because they're not being shot down by objections right off the bat. And if you guys ever have any questions on how to use that, you guys know where to find me. But going back to the motive, he said, if you can train yourself to hear it in a different way and actually revise your opening script, where before I would say, hey, my name is Daniel with New American Funding. Thank you for taking this call. How can I help you? That's the traditional method of loan officers taking the inbound call. I hear it all the time. The script that you're going to use or you're going to find, it sounds something like this. Hey, Paul, thanks for holding. My name is Daniel. The reason why James is transferring you over to me is because I'm actually authorized to provide you with the information you need. But before I begin, let me just make sure I can even move forward. I'm asked a few basic questions first. This is going to let me know if I can help you. If I can, I'm going to show you exactly what I can do. But if I can't, I'm going to save you a ton of time. Make sense? Far more effective. And the reason for that is because I opened up their guard, because everyone's going to have a guard. All these prospects, the last thing they want to do is be sold to. They don't want to be sold, right? They got the defense mechanism. And so I don't allow them a chance to ask me what the price is. Instead, I control the conversation and I more or less set up the precedents. Now, by me telling them that, hey, I'm asking a few basic questions, it removes the anxiety from them. By me telling them that if I can't help you, I'm gonna save you a ton of time, removes their primary objection. Hey, I don't wanna waste my time. Hey, before I give you that information, what's your lowest rate and fee? So I'm actually addressing those. And one fundamental skill that you should practice is, especially when you're just beginning, is record yourself. Our phone system has the capability to record your conversation. And the reason why I would recommend that is because number one is you need to critique yourself. Also, you need to know when certain objections come up and backtrack your dialogue. So if you're constantly reaching a specific objection 3 minutes into the conversation, if you backtrack the dialogue, it's because oftentimes your verbiage is what's actually setting off that trigger. Make sense? So keep that in mind. But they said the goal is to find the motive. And And if you can identify that M stands for motive, then you have I, which is for interest and intent. So as a consumer, whenever we see an advertisement, the only reason we actually give it more attention in our time is if there's motive behind it. Meaning that that particular advertisement or that whatever it is can help us solve something, right? Otherwise, we're not really interested. Because we as human animals and human nature, we are constantly kind of dispositioning information, right? So if you think about how many alerts you get per day, how many distractions you get per day, text messages, spam email notifications. So we are constantly on this kind of important, delete, important, delete, right? So the average person's advertised and pitched to some odd number, I think it was like 500 times per day. And so we're constantly kind of filtering this data. And so when we find something that actually applies to us, we'll give it a little bit more attention, right? And so that's what he meant. He said the I stands for interest and intent. He said if your marketing's on point and there's a motive, you'll naturally get the interest. They'll be interested in what it is you have to offer. But when the consumers are interested, how they ask you is saying, hey, Daniel, what's the fee on that? Or, hey, what's your lowest rate? That's their way of being interested, right? But we have to figure out what their intent is. And so, again, going a little bit deeper under the layer of that specific question of like, hey, besides the interest, what's your lowest rate? What's your lowest fee? We need to know what their intent is. And so oftentimes we'll want a lower rate or a lower fee because our intent is to redirect the savings. Make sense? So again, consumers not being as aware of how the process works, they'll put two and two together and just think that if I lower my rate by a full point, then I should be able to save enough money. But if we open up the reason for that and peel back the layers, the reason for saving that much money is because they have a pain to fulfill. Get it? So in any sales dialogue or any sales engagement, there are two things that people are often trying to do. The very first one is to avoid a specific pain and to then secure pleasure. That's just the human science of it. Now, what does that mean though? So avoid a specific pain, meaning I need to lower my payment because it's painful living check to check. Very common characteristic for homeowners in today's society. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah, you don't need to be a homeowner. People just live in check to check. And the reason why they need to kind of remove themselves from the pain is because they want to find the pleasure of knowing they can provide security, knowing they can secure a specific status of home ownership and caretaking for their family. Get it? So when you understand that level of it, you remove yourself from a salesman. You are more now of a consultant. And so when I told you guys about like dealing with a CPA or an accountant or like a doctor, these are consultants, but still they're there to sell you their service, right? The only difference is though, they are subject matter experts. And when you position yourself as an expert, more of a consultant, you come off in a different way. Meaning, whereas a traditional salesman would be more or less like, hey, Paul, how you doing? This is Daniel with New American Funding. It's a great day here at my company. How can I help you? That's a traditional sales theme, right? But if you switch up the dialogue and actually speak to them like they're a human being, you separate yourself from the rest and you sound a little bit different. And the only thing that you're really trying to do is differentiate yourself from the Loan Depots, the Quickens, the Ownings, those competitors, right? And so one way to understand that is, I don't want to go too deep on you guys, but there are certain things that trigger us. They trigger us emotionally and it triggers our guard. One of the triggers are, think of it as the sound, like the sound effect of certain things. So if you've ever watched a movie and you could tell something like scary is about to happen, the song comes on, right? Like there's a rhythm and we're triggered this way. We're triggered by certain sounds. And I think that consumers are they're the same way. We all are in the same way. We could be triggered into a specific emotion based on our music genre. Get it? So if it's a fast-paced, high type, right? You almost want to do some cardio. You want to go to the gym. It's a little slow pace, slow beat. You want to relax and do a barbecue or something, right? It just kind of triggers and ripples throughout the rest. So if you understand that, that'll allow you to kind of take control of the conversation. Now, the reason why I want to go over that is because, again, M is motive, marketing and motive, right? And then you have I for interest and intent. So the goal is to figure out what their intent is. They have motive enough to contact us and ask us questions. Now our true goal is to figure out what their intent is. When we figure out what their intent is, then we unlock their desire, their desired outcome. So if Mr. Patel called me and asked me for a 1.25% fixed, I'm not going to block him and say, hey, Mr. Patel, that's just not available. The rate doesn't give that right now. Instead, I'm gonna train myself to hear, hey, Daniel, I really need a lower rate because I've got some pain that I need to avoid and I wanna find some pleasure. As corny as that sounds, right? Okay, Mr. Patel. So, but that's how I'm gonna train myself to hear it. And the reason why I'm gonna do that is because I still need to identify what his intent and his desired outcome is. So I know he wants a lower payment, but why? So when I figure out that his intent is to redirect that savings because of numerous things, whether he's living check to check, whether he has kids that are getting older, so they require higher expenses, whether it's because his wife is on maternity leave and he's the sole income, whether it's because maybe there's, extra expenses like daycare, things that don't show on the credit report. And these are very important things that you guys got to keep a lookout for because they're not necessarily going to tell you these things. So the script is going to tell you how that conversation is based, but if you understand that these pillars are vitally important, then you're going to look beyond just the face of the conversation. Because if you don't pay attention to the actual context of the conversation, it's just going to be a cycle over and over and over and over again. You're going to be like these newer agents who just keep pounding their head on the screen. They don't understand why they can't make a sale, but they're going through hundreds of leads and hundreds of phone calls to convert one sale. If you understand this concept, much like my mentor taught me, my conversion ratio shot through the roof because I started having fun with it. Because it was almost like the Matrix movie, right? Like, oh shit, I could see numbers now, right? Like you see the code. And it was pretty cool because then I would have fun with it. I wasn't actually on defense anymore. Because much like sounds that trigger a specific emotion, it started to trigger emotions with me. So right when I started to hear the question of, hey, Daniel, before I give you any of my information, what's your rate and what's your payment, used to trigger frustration from me. And you're gonna get to a point that you're gonna feel that. I mean, that's just the truth of it. You get to a point like, oh, here we go, right? No matter how strong of a mindset you are, no matter how much you practice, there's gonna be times where you just don't wanna go through it. But if you break it down to its bare bones and you understand that this is just a science, there's a process to it where you can quickly convert that lead into buying into just you. You're gonna protect yourself from a lot of follow-up calls. You're gonna protect yourself from a ton of ghosted prospects that won't answer your calls anymore, right? They actually are tied to you. There's an emotional tie. And it's primarily because you found their desired outcome. And I would definitely recommend that in order to figure out what the specific desired outcome is, you have to ask them certain questions that you will never find on the 1003. I'm gonna give you a few of these questions, and with the script and with your creativity, you're gonna know when to plant these specific questions, okay? So, one of the main questions that I ask first, right, when I use a script, and again, you guys can download it at salesremaster.com, is I ask the question here on Myford. This is your primary home, right? And the reason why I say it in that order is because now I've gained some authority because they understand what Myford is, right? So Myford, oh, this guy knows my address. Make sense? So now I'm kind of creating this bond. And so when they say, yeah, it's my primary home. Okay, got it. Besides the mortgage, what other debt do you have? Let's start with revolving. And the reason for that is because I need to understand where he is financially. Because depending on his answers, it's going to determine the direction of my conversation. So oftentimes what you're gonna find like, oh, revolving debt, I probably owe maybe about 20 grand. These specific questions create what's called bridge questions. Bridge questions meaning that when I ask this question, they're gonna give me an answer which allows me to bridge over to where I need to go. So in that example, I'd be like, you know what, outside of the mortgage, how much in total debt do you have? Let's start with revolving debt. Revolving debt, I owe about 20 grand. Got it. What is the payment that you send each month roughly on that 20 grand? Now I'm paying attention to the way he answers. If he says, we send, then I know another decision maker exists. And I know not to speak numbers to this person. Make sense? If he says, I think, then I know he's not the financial controller of that household. I know not to speak numbers to him. I know not to allow him to reiterate everything I'm gonna go over with this guy, because again, I'm gonna invest an hour of my life with this person, right? But if he says, you know what, Daniel, we send about $500 per month on it, then it creates a bridge question. Because again, what am I trying to do? I'm gonna try to find what his intent is and his desired result. So when he says, I send $500 per month, Daniel, got it. Is that the minimum or is that above and beyond the minimum? And the reason why I'm asking that question, you guys probably already put two and two together, is because if they're paying the minimum, I now have leverage. Make sense? Even if they said I pay above and beyond, I have even more leverage because I could tell he wants to pay off the debt. You see where I'm going here? So in sales, the reason why he taught me this Midas touch, he said, the reason why this is very effective, Daniel, is because it's all about positioning. If you ever want to win at anything in life, you have to position yourself to win. And what he was talking about was, you know, before he gave me this piece of advice, I wasn't positioning myself to win a sale. I was more or less crossing my fingers, spitting out some numbers and hoping he didn't hang up. And you're gonna see this mistake happen time and time again. It's gonna hurt your ears. You'll be like, damn, bro, you should have just transferred over to me. I probably could have closed that one, right? But again, now you see it for what it is. You're gonna have fun with it. And you're gonna be able to kind of identify like these little pinpoints that create so much of a strong bond that these people will do whatever it is you want them to do. Got it? So these are the same lessons that you know I get to share with my team. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a manager in ILA. And our team, amongst 23 teams all across the nation, is the #1 team. So to put it in perspective, second place funded 147 units. Our team funded 210 last month. That's why I got the gear, bro. But the reason why they're able to do that is, and I'm not taking full credit or anything, I'm just sharing with you that they understand that these specific traits, they understand these little key ingredients and they run with it. Whereas a lot of the mistakes that happen from other agents, they treat it more or less like a grind. And one thing that I learned about being in sales is that if you treat your orientation, or you treat your job like a grind, you're gonna find reasons to hate it. But if you treat it like a game, you'll actually find reasons and ways to win. Make sense? That's some Confucius shit right there. I like that. Yeah. Man, I'm gonna make a meme out of that. But so I guess where I'm getting at is, you know, bridge questions are very powerful. And there are other bridge questions like, here's another one, and we'll move on to the A and the S, because I know I don't have too much time with you guys. But another bridge question would be like, let's say he sends 500 and you say, okay, is that above and beyond? They say above. Okay, got it. Outside of revolving and the mortgage, what other debts do you have? And they're gonna be like, well, I got a student loan, a car loan. Okay, got it. How much roughly do you send on these items? And say I send maybe about 600, 700. Okay, so obviously this is not all you have, because I don't know your utilities, your daycare, your after school expenses, even if you have children. In mortgage, we have what's called a net income. Net income means you have your gross income and then you have your net after your taxes are deducted. But your net is how much of your net income is left after you net out all your other expenses. So your total monthly expense. I'm talking about your electricity, your car, hobbies, dining out. What's your net? And so they'll get an idea. And they'll say, you know, my net, they're always gonna say a high number. My net's 2 grand. Say, okay, got it. So you're able to net 2 grand into your savings. Again, a bridge question, because I need to figure out leverage on how do you just ask somebody, how much do you have in the bank? It's kind of a personal and easy question, right? So I create a bridge question that funnels me in that direction and say, okay, cool, your net's about 2 grand. And you're able to net that and keep that in checking and savings. How much do you average in your checking and savings balance? Now that's the real question. That's the meat and bones, right? Because what you're gonna hear them say is, I don't know, maybe 1,000. Keep in mind, they just said they net $2,000. It's always gonna be higher, so you gotta dig a little bit deeper, right? And say, okay, so if you only have $1,000 left at the end of each month, what's your gross income? Again, bridge question, right? So my gross income is probably about 200,000. Oh, got it. Okay, so you got a lot of expenses coming in the house. You see how you're building up the leverage? It's away from, hey, what's your lowest rate? What's your lowest fee? Now I'm actually penetrating the emotional aspect of the conversation. So I'm finding the leverage, I'm finding their desired result, and they don't need to tell me. Now, after D comes A. A is applicable action. So the reason why you want to find their desired result is because you need to make applicable your pitch, your presentation. In short, it's the difference of saying, hey, Mr. Jones, I can pay off your credit cards and save you some money per month. Versus, hey, Mr. Jones, I have an idea. We can actually wipe out the Discover, the Chase, and the Barclays that you told me that you're sending $800 per month. What that will naturally do is help improve your FICO score, put more net savings inside your bank, add to that $1,000, and help you build more reserves for your family. Now it's applicable. Get it? And the reason why you need it to be applicable is because you can't just spit something out and hope this guy's gonna take action. Much like how we act as consumers, the only time we really take action and invest our time or exchange our money is when it applies to us. Get it? A lot of loan officers don't understand that. You're gonna hear them too many times, like, okay, I got option number 1, option number 2, option number 3. And that's what I was doing before my mentor taught me. And oftentimes what happened when I would present my pitch that way was I would either, one, give them too much to think about. They would naturally hit me with, okay, well, D, that's a lot of information. Let me think about it and call you back. Never heard from them again, right? You see, whenever we meet with an accountant or we meet with an attorney or we meet with a doctor, they don't say, hey, I got option 1, option 2, option 3, right? They tell you, okay, based on what your symptoms, this is what you got to do. That's the difference between a salesman and a consultant. Get it? So if you can make it applicable and you can enforce action, then you run to S, which is solution. And the reason why S comes after action, right? Solution comes after action is because after you've made it applicable and then you've told them how to attain it, how to activate it, how to take action, then you serve the solution. You don't offer it. There's a difference between offering and giving. So usually salesmen will offer, just like say, hey, I got option 1, option 2, option 3, that's offering. Serving is more of a consultant saying, hey, I got an idea. Based on your situation with the credit cards and the $1,000 in the month in the bank and the fact that you owe 30 grand in credit card debt, this is again being applicable. What I think we can do, and let me know what your feedback is on this, because I, as the subject matter expert and I as the consultant, I'm not asking him what he wants. You get it? Because if I asked him what he wants, one thing that humans really don't like doing is making decisions, especially if it's over a topic they don't really want to talk about, that they feel uncomfortable with, or they don't really understand the context of, right? They don't really understand mortgage. They just know it's the biggest debt. And if we ask them and put them in a spot to make a decision, you face the chance of them kind of getting cold feet. They don't know what to do because they're scared of the repercussion. They're scared of the consequence. They're scared of making the wrong decision. So instead, by presenting your pitch in that way and saying, hey, you know what, I got an idea. I just want your feedback on it real quick. You know, based on what you had shared with me about your credit card debt and your current net savings, I think that we can actually turn this into a benefit for you. We can wipe out these credit cards, give you this much in monthly savings, put this much more money in the bank, improve your FICO, give you 12 months of living in the bank versus that $1,000. And then after 6 to 12 months, I could show you how to pay this house off 10 years sooner. What's your thoughts on that? Now it's much stronger than saying, hey, I got option number 1, I got option number 2, right? And so if you've done everything right, the MIDAS correctly, naturally what will happen is they'll end up saying, man, that sounds perfect. How do we do it? That's how you close a sale. Got it? It's pretty deep, huh? Yeah. All right. So yeah, I kind of like that acronym, and I'm actually tweaking it out because, there's this one saying that the teacher learns the most. And what they're referring to is that, if you get to a position where you've been doing it for so long and you start teaching it, you actually relearn it again and again. So it's pretty cool because as I'm going through this like, obviously I have a side business, and that side business is mentoring loan officers, right? So I've got a lot of loan officers I mentor from our competitors, which is odd, right? But hey, it pays the bills. And so they, obviously they hire me, and so I consult with them, and I actually, I'm their mentor. I provide them with the online training. But they're asking a lot of these questions that I forget about, right? Because I've been doing it for a long time. And one of the things that I'm always looking back on are these lessons that I learned from growing up and coming up in this business. And so what allowed me to escalate very fast in any sales environment that I had was because I utilized that process. I understood that really every decision is backed by 3 primary emotions. Those primary emotions are love, fear, and status. And that's even deeper, right? So if you understand what that person loves, if you understand what they fear, and if you understand what they need to survive, their status, their self-preservation, you can break down anyone's train of thought and control their buying decision. I know it sounds persuasive, but we do this for a good cause. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't take advantage of people because they turned it, all these regulations, where before when I was coming up, they didn't have no rules, so we're able to make like 6%. I was just telling you guys earlier, one of the first goals I ever had was to make $10,000 in a month. And I was like 22 years old, right? That was like the the shining top of the mountain. That was Mount Everest for me. And I remember I couldn't hit it. And then the closest I ever got to it was $8,000. And then after my mentor took me under his wing, the very first month that I ever hit over 10 grand, I hit $72,000 in 1 month. And then after I left that company and became a broker, because there were no rules, right? And not like the rules we have now. Back then we used to charge points. So if I charged you 1 point on 500,000, I made 5 grand. So I went from 72 grand in 1 month doing 13 loans to 72 grand on 1 deal. Yeah. So those were some good times. But then it taught you different things, right? Because as a young kid, you didn't understand the value of money. So you were burning it up. And that's something that you guys have to also understand, is that this job is going to put you in a position where you're going to earn more money and more income than your family members do. It's going to be weird. But the key thing is, though, is that you understand that you need a foundation, because this market is not always going to be how it is right now. And there is the typical trend where, usually with the youngsters, is that you could tell they're making money because they get the latest iPhone. They get the gadgets, right? They got the Bluetooth, like $900 Bluetooth. They get a couple suits. The car goes from a Civic to a BMW, right? You go from that apartment to maybe the condo or the house, and this is the track sign of money. It's natural. But what happens, though, too often times, is we get very comfortable with our income, and then our liabilities begin to match that income. So you don't want to think that you're always going to make 10, 15, 20 grand a month. Don't live your life like you're going to make 10, 15, 20 grand every month. The best thing that best recommendation beyond even the Midas acronym that I can tell you is always, always, always have at least 6 to 12 months of living in your bank tucked away. So what's living, right? So you add up all your living expense, itemize that shit. Because the last thing you want to be is that salesman who's in a tight spot and you're selling from desperation. Because you will implode. That shit will fuck with you. Sorry for the curse. It will really mess you up. And one thing that I always tell a lot of my students is that the best possible place that you can come from when you're selling is when you don't even really need the sale, right? Because when you don't need the sale and you really come off like, hey, you could hire me or not, boo-boo, I'm here, right? Like I just taught you how, I just showed you how I could change your life. Your choice. that's much more leverage than me chasing Mr. Patel. But Mr. Patel, I know you want 1.5. I know this is 4.5, but please, will you do business with me, right? It's all about positioning. So really take that to heart, okay? Good stuff?
Yeah, good stuff,
Yeah, okay, cool. So I got a couple minutes for Q&A if you guys have any questions. Okay. Yeah.
So what's something you may say to the customer to end the phone call knowing that you're going to not be able to make the sale, that will perhaps have them remember you, the company, or maybe even prevent them from shopping?
Okay, so what do I say at the end after pitching if they don't buy?
Right.
Okay, to be honest with you, I don't know because they always buy. You got to come off that way though, right? No, to really be honest, the reason they don't buy, oftentimes it's because I position myself incorrectly. So, and that means that both decision makers weren't there. So again, I'm listening to cues that there are other people involved. Even if they're not on the loan, I'm gonna make sure that I position myself properly. And this is just through repetition. But if in the event that I were to pitch the husband because I was too impatient and I did not position myself to win, and I said, you know what, I'll just pitch you. Hopefully you could reiterate everything I told you to your wife later on after 5 hours of work and you forget about 90% of the shit that I just told you, right? So if that were to happen and they said, you know what, Daniel, I'm gonna go and think about it, then I actually do everything I can before I hang up. And so there's a series of funnel questions where basically I'm cornering them. And so my question would be, first off, we find out the reason why they're not buying, right? And so oftentimes I say, yeah, we just wanna think about it, we wanna compare. So my response would be, okay, got it. Just so I can make note in your file for the next time that we do talk, if we do talk. When you guys do talk about it and think about it, what's the primary topic? What are the 3 primary concerns that you guys are gonna talk about? And if they say, I don't know, blah, blah, then I'll start throwing them out. Is it the price? Is it the rate? Is it the fee? Right? Whatever. And what they're gonna do is they're gonna tell you what their concerns are. And oftentimes it's saying the rate. And that's where, again, when you record yourself, you're able to backtrack, right? And so if you're constantly getting hit with that objection, oh, it's the rate, it's the rate, it's the rate, it's the rate. What we often find is our dialogue is all about, yeah, we got the lowest rates in the market, but we don't even know it because it's part of our script. So if we decorate our conversation all about, yeah, we got the lowest rates. Oh yeah, rates are super low. Oh yeah, market's down, rates are at an all-time low. We're actually decorating the conversation and setting up the expectation for them to hear a very, very low rate. Make sense? So I never talk about the market, never talk about that. I only talk about what's applicable to them because what's applicable to them, they'll take action on. Answer your question? Mm-hmm. Yep.
Early on, I got to see one of your videos. You're talking about purchase. And what you do is you find out where the wife works, you send her this huge bouquet so that all of her friends can see it and you gain other traction, other business that way. Would you do the same thing with Reframing?
No, because our systems, it's pretty advanced. So it does everything from put your face on their mortgage billing statement, unless it's like Wells Fargo, but it also sends out constant like birthday cards and birthday emails. So that's kind of on autopilot. And because the marketing's so much on point, that video was more for Ola's side because they don't have leads, right? So that was more of a marketing stunt to get your name out there because they're not like us in the call center. We're fed leads all day, right? You know what I mean? So it's all about positioning.
Thank you.
Yep.
Actually, following up with how you ended it there, we're being taught this two call close kind of a scenario.
Yes.
The anxiety that I'm getting from that is kind of you having that person because a lot of people in the market's great and the interest rates are supposed to be lower. So how do I kind of just fend them off or give them a taste of it and be like, hey, I'm going to give you the whole thing, the second call. How do I kind of ease his nerves there, the prospect, then kind of set it up for the second call?
Sure. So we paint the perception to our prospects how we choose, right? And so there's a wrong way to do it and a right way to do it. The wrong way to do it is the most common way. And it's basically ending the conversation saying, okay, I'm gonna go and put the options together and then I'll call you back with a couple options. That's always how it ends. That's the incorrect way. Because what happens is when you tell them that, they're already expecting to be pitched on the next call, right? So, hey, I'm gonna call you in about 30 minutes with a couple options. So now they're on guard going into that conversation. Instead, you should paint the picture of like, okay, sounds good. I'm gonna go ahead and put together your disclosures. When I have it ready to release, I'll request your consent. Hey, by the way, when are you gonna be by a home computer or a tablet to give consent? I'm hinting to the notion that they need to be at home to give consent, right? If they, again, I'm painting the picture, so they believe what I make them believe. Instead of saying, hey, can you do it from your work computer? Because I don't want them to be at work. Because if they're at work, they got distractions, right? Deadlines, meetings, appointments, lunchtime. There's so many things that's gonna deter their attention away from me, and I need that attention. So then he says, oh, I'm gonna be at 5. Okay, cool. What time will the missus be by a home computer or a tablet to also give consent so I could release the disclosures? So again, it's not a pitch, it's releasing the disclosures. So they believe that they're gonna get whatever they get. Got it? So they say, yeah, I'll be home. She'll be at home to give consent at 5 o'clock. I don't even ask for the appointment. I just know that I'm gonna pitch them at 5 o'clock. Got it? And so when I call them, I basically say, okay, I'll go ahead and have everything ready, and I'll release once you guys give consent. If when I release it, you're gonna receive an email notification letting you know it's ready. Otherwise, if I run into any hiccups or have any questions, I'll call you first. So now it's non-threatening, right? And now I open up the second call in a different manner. Whereas again, there's a correct way and incorrect way. An incorrect way is, hey, Mr. Jones, I got a couple options for you. Grab a pen and paper. That's the incorrect way because you're putting them on guard, right? The correct way is, hey, I was putting together those disclosures and I found something. I got a question for you. Is Mrs. there? You know she's there because she said, right? Do you mind putting me on speakerphone? Hey, Mrs. Jones, got it. And this is where you reframe the conversation because again, hours have gone by. Many things have occurred ever since you had them in that emotional state. So it's very important that you reframe them again. And you could do it through kind of repeating it to Mrs. Jones. Hey, Mrs. Jones, I talked to Mr. Jones. He told me that you guys were 30 grand in credit card debt. You guys were netting $100 per month. You only have about $1,000 in the monthly bank. The primary goal is to really pay off all these credit cards because you guys are living check to check. So I'm reframing the conversation, right? Anyway, I was about to send out your disclosures and I found a couple things. I want to run it by you, get your feedback first before I send it out. Because again, they believe I'm just sending out the disclosures, but I'm actually planting in the pitch. Got it? Yeah. And that's why they never really say no. Yeah.
So obviously the income is going to come from, or our income is going to be off the leads we get. Okay, so how would we go about that, growing it exponentially? I know, i.e. marketing ourselves, going out to, meeting people on the street, whatever. So what would you say could elevate us to that next level where, hey, instead of maybe teeter-tottering between 8 and 10, now we're negotiating 15, 20 plus?
Yeah, so good question. First off, because of the call center and the marketing foundation of NAF, you don't need to go out and market yourself, right? What will actually keep you, I got a team member of mine, his name's Kevin Garcia. You know him. And this guy's a machine. He's always on the phone. He's never out in the streets marketing, right? He's never going to meet realtors. What he does is he puts himself in a position where he's constantly originating business. And this is how he's able to fund over 20 per month. This is the reason why he's making damn near over 40 grand a month, right? So it's because he understands his lane and he doesn't veer off. Now, to answer your question, how do you position yourself so that you can get as much as 20 units? The real question should be, because the marketing will handle that. They'll give you 100 opportunities. It's up to you if you can get 20 of them, right? The real question is, how can I get to 20 plus units without working 12-hour shifts, without having to sacrifice my weekend? How can I outproduce the top producer and only do 8 hours per day? That was my question coming in. And I was able to do that. And the reason why I was able to do that is because I broke it down to a science. And then when I figured out that system and the process, the one that I'm outlining to you guys here today, and executed it, I just refined it. And it became clockwork, right? Because I had enough emotional investment from them to get me everything that I needed, enough experience to understand what those things are that I needed, to where I can hand the baton off and faithfully let it go through the process.